Well, I'm looking for something special.
Can I interest you in a pet? They make excellent companions. Very good luck, too.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thank you. I know you'll fall in love.
I'll be sure to take extra special care of this bird.
Oh my God! What is that?
I'm not really sure why I decided to talk about this game. I'm not that familiar with the True Crime series, which is what this game was originally based off of, and United Front Games doesn't exactly have the most storied history. While they started out with a kart racing game, they ended as mostly a support studio. And these guys were apparently working on their early access game before it was unceremoniously announced that they're shutting down. They hadn't even quite reached the decade mark yet before this happened. They basically came through, dropped a banger, and then disappeared like your favorite SoundCloud artist. The foreclosure of an independent game studio isn't exactly uncommon, but what makes this one kind of weird is that Sleeping Dogs was probably their biggest success. While Square Enix didn't exactly acknowledge it as one, and as far as I can find, it didn't really sell that much better than any other game I've talked about on this channel. For a new IP that went through the obligatory development problems, it didn't seem to do terribly comparatively. The studio was also apparently filled with a lot of talent as well, featuring people from Radical, Black Box, and Rockstar. For unknown reasons, things just didn't work out, which is maybe one of the scariest ways I think you could go out in this industry. Getting axed by your publisher as one of their in-house developers is possibly the only other much worse way. Mourning over the death of a studio is not what we do around here, though. We're here to celebrate the life that the studio created with a game about taking lives the only way an undercover cop on the streets of Hong Kong knows how. Serving up bus ass. So this game starts out with the classic drug deal gone wrong. While it doesn't lead to a big shootout, we do get to see some poor dude take a cleaver to the face. I love how this guy just walks up and the first reaction he has to getting his authority challenged is asking, "Do you know who I am?" Like, bro, you have a security badge. How much power could you possibly flex here? I respect that this guy takes his job very seriously, but the joke of him acting like he's some sort of notorious gangster in a gangster game is not lost on me. After Four Finger Wu shows us that he's probably going to actually end up with four fingers after this botched job, our two drug dealers make a run for it before eventually being apprehended. Our lead character, Wei Shen, links up with an old friend, Jackie Ma, in jail before it's revealed that this was all part of an undercover operation. We're then introduced to Wei's superintendent, Thomas Pendrew, as well as his handler, Raymond Ma, who tasks Wei to take down Hong Kong's biggest crime syndicate, the Sun On Yee, from the inside. From the very jump, it's established that Pendrew is pretty confident in Wei's ability to accomplish this mission, while Raymond still has a few concerns, mainly about Wei's psyche. This lays out the relationship that Wei is going to keep with these two characters for the majority of the story. I like how this opening doesn't waste much time in showing the audience how stupidly violent the thugs in Hong Kong can be. Old Four Finger here acts all reserved and shit when doing the deal with Wei, but then when a security guard gets in the way of him sampling his nose candy, he has no problem pulling a butcher knife out on him. This behavior of resorting to violence with the quickness only continues as Wei reintegrates himself back into Hong Kong. As Jackie is taking him to go see the leader of the Water Street Boys gang, he gets jumped by a random group of 18K thugs from seemingly out of nowhere. This guy doesn't even bother explaining what he's pissed off about. He just tells Jackie that he's gonna take this ass whooping and he's gonna like it. Wei then comes to Jackie's defense and it's time to start throwing hands. After Wei practically bisects their main aggressor, Jackie collects himself and finds out that he may have made the situation with his crush even worse now. As it turns out, Winston, the gang leader, often likes to work out of his mom's restaurant. Here we meet Conroy, Winston's second in command, as well as Winston himself. Jackie vouches for Wei, telling both of them that Wei is good for the gang. Winston is a bit more receptive to Wei's possible inclusion in their operations than Conroy is. While he is second in command, he doesn't seem to have much sway over Winston's ultimate decision-making. Winston kind of treats him like a lapdog here, honestly, sending him and Wei out to go take care of an issue they're having in the night market. Conroy ain't exactly having it though, so he elects to give Wei a good old-fashioned jump in first. Luckily, all Wei really has to do is just kind of stand there with his hands up like Kenshi and let his training do the rest. This little back alley rumble is pretty rudely interrupted by another Triad gang leader, Sam Dog Eyes Lin. He comes bearing a proposition for Winston, suggesting that they should share the night market. It's pretty clear that Dog Eyes' attempt to be hospitable is just a front, and his real intention is to eventually take complete control of the night market away from Winston. Winston can see through the bullshit though, and tells Dog Eyes to get the step in, but not before he makes more sexual gestures toward Wei's dead sister. I'm just gonna say this right now, in terms of overall misogyny and the representation of the criminal underworld's outlook on a woman's value in it, this game pulls very few punches. There's no shortage of heavy references to sex trafficking and body snatching throughout the game, extremely slimy discussions about it, as well as just the overall attitude a lot of male characters display toward females, even when they're in a position of power themselves. Now, I'm not saying all of this is some kind of complaint, but more just to give you an idea of how raw this game is with this topic. While you aren't going to be seeing dudes straight up banging prostitutes, a lot of the anecdotes characters give, both from males and females in this game, aren't exactly going to be making you laugh. I think the point is to make the player feel gross when hearing them, so from that perspective I can understand it. I'm honestly surprised that one of the few pieces of evidence I could find of feminist frequency referencing this game is when Anita Sarkeesian is droning on about dudes' asses. Did anybody actually take this channel seriously? It's time for Jackie and Wei to clean up confusion on the streets through intimidation and interrogation, and after Wei cops some new gang drip, he's confronted by Conroy again. Shit-talking ensues, but what amuses me about this scene is that wasn't this supposed to be Conroy's job? Where was he this whole time? After the hazing, he kinda just disappears with his buddies. Maybe they went to go take care of other parts of the night market? But Conroy also admits that he was just supervising Wei and Jackie. Where does this guy get off criticizing how Wei handles business when he's not even handling his own? As we get back to the Golden Koi, Winston is irate over a new development. Apparently, a well-known associate of his is no longer in need of his services, who says Dog Eyes has got him covered. Wei practically jumps at this opportunity, but Winston is still hesitant on doing anything about Dog Eyes yet, so he sends Wei to deal with this currently former associate instead. I like how in the police report for Winston, assumedly written by the guy that attempted this op before Wei, he comments on how fast his come up in the gang was, which more than likely means that the Water Street boys are especially vulnerable right now, and somewhat justifies Conroy's distrust toward Wei, although he pretty much just says he doesn't like Wei, mostly because of how Wei just kind of swaggered his way in. But if this gang is truly lacking muscle right now, then they might just have to take what they can get. Plus, it's not like the jobs Winston is having Wei do are very glamorous in terms of being a gangster, which is something that Wei even admits annoyance with later on, though this could just be his stress talking. Regardless, he's still very much just doing grunt work. Now, the report also claims that Winston doesn't really have the acumen to create bigger and better opportunities for his gang. So for all we know, the ones Wei is getting right now could also technically be the biggest ones that anyone in Winston's gang could be getting. At any rate, it doesn't take very long before Wei is arrested again. In the interrogation room, we're introduced to Inspector Jane Tang, who gives Wei the rundown of his criminal record and attempts to appeal to him. Wei, still playing the criminal bit, tells her she can take a long walk off a short pier. They're both interrupted by Pendrew, who's basically forced to tell Tang that Wei is a cop, much to Wei's irritation. The ultimate purpose of this scene is just to inform Tang of Wei's undercover position as quickly as possible, but character-wise, Pendrew's motivation here is to get Wei back on the street in a timely fashion. Still, outside of needing it for the story, I'm not really sure why Pendrew chose to drop this bombshell on Tang. It's not like she really has any power here. While she may threaten protocol, I'm sure both Pendrew and Wei know that they're above protocol right now. I think it would have been a lot more interesting to have Tang storm out of the room in frustration after being ordered to, and then have her stir up some bigger trouble later on that would give either Pendrew or Wei himself a more significant reason to tell her the situation. Pendrew had to have just been mad upset with Tang and didn't want to deal with her bullshit, which leads me to believe that this isn't the first time he's been angry with her. While I could make a suggestion on how Tang would function as an antagonist to Wei, let's just see how well she plays into the story with this more immediate involvement. Later on, Wei meets up with Jackie again and tells him that shit is moving too slow. If they want to level up in this game, they gotta make the experience themselves. Jackie gives Wei the deets on a shipment of merchandise Dog Eyes is supposed to be receiving and suggests that they hijack it. I love how gleefully impressionable Jackie is as a character. Like, this man is a big kid. He can't be that much younger than much of the other major characters, yet he routinely gets treated like the naive little brother, and he pretty much revels in that role.
Unless we get caught.
Well, we won't unless you fuck it up.
All you have to do is recite the Rock's verse from Face Off and he'll be in the palm of your hands. Though it's clear that Jackie is really only good for engaging in thievery and little else when it comes to any sort of criminal activity. Like, this dude is rolling around with stolen CRT monitors in the back of his van, to which I can only assume he acquired from the home invasion minigame in San Andreas. The only reason why I'd believe Winston keeps Jackie in the gang is because he's easy to boss around. I'm not really sure what other value Jackie contributes to its operations. After breaking a few faces, Wei and Jackie collect the goods and go meet with the buyer. He gives Wei one of the fake watches for his trouble. While Jackie is getting the money straight, Wei gives Tang a visit. Her reaction to Wei's appearance is one of surprise and confusion.
I'm just a little shocked. I'm just used to Pendrew's people being more like him.
This alludes to what I speculated on earlier, that Tang and Pendrew do have a complicated history. Since she was unceremoniously brought into this undercover job, I assume she's here so Raymond can keep a close eye on her. She's not really making any direct contributions to this mission herself. Wei only comes here in an attempt to make amends with her, which I'm honestly surprised Raymond has no objections with. Wei's main prerogative is to take down the Sun On Yee. Splitting his attention between that and helping Tang could possibly be disastrous if he makes the wrong move, and Raymond was instantly established as a character that's all about risk assessment. While I still think Wei has a good case in arguing that helping Tang also helps him accomplish his primary objective, it still would have been cool to see Raymond butt in here. So Wei's first order of assistance is digging around the Special K market. Ming, the associate of Winston who Wei beat up earlier, tells him that he's too bitch-made to check in with his supplier again after switching back to Winston's protection. Guy named Popstar is pretty chill about the whole situation though, and after a little bit of debt collection, everything's copacetic. But after catching Popstar's main hookup on CCTV, a disguised Wei then catches Popstar in the act of shopping around for a new one. With all this evidence against him, Popstar's gonna have a tough time beating this case. With Tang satisfied, Wei does a few more things for Winston. He strong-arms a bus route and harasses a club manager that Dog Eyes is using to get back at Winston for strong-arming that bus route. Wei also finds the time to go on a date or two, but the important things here is the stuff he's doing for Winston. All of it shows how much trust Winston is putting in Wei to do these things for him. While we can discern that Winston is probably getting just a little pissed off from all the side-switching dudes is doing, so would most people, I think. I'd hazard a guess that his anger here isn't solely a result of his steroid abuse. Every issue Winston has had so far has involved people he's claimed to be friendly with at some point. The feelings of betrayal have got to be real. Most of these people are probably just lucky that Wei has been offering to do all the dirty work for Winston lately. If it was just up to Winston himself, they'd probably all be dead, which is something that Winston proves here in a minute, but not before Wei has his first meeting with Raymond. Wei is obviously under a high amount of pressure, and pretty much sees this meeting as a huge inconvenience for him. Raymond steers the conversation toward Wei's mental stability and harps on how important it is. Wei ain't exactly in the mood though, and questions why Raymond would be concerned with him at all. What I find engaging about this conversation is that Wei seems uninterested in having a handler and feels like he'd be better off working on his own. While this may be true, Raymond is just doing his job here and Wei basically gives him an earful for it. This kind of makes Wei look like a dickhead despite the fact that he is in a pressure cooker right now. I do agree with the concept that they aren't the same, but Wei also isn't exactly showing much respect to Raymond. Now, in Wei's defense, Raymond isn't showing much respect to Wei either by ignoring his police write-ups. So I do understand why Wei's straight up heated that he has to deal with Raymond at all right now, when his reports should be able to tell him the full story by themselves. But this also pretty much ignores the idea that Wei could be suffering from some kind of psychosis and not even know it. Hell, even if Raymond was reading Wei's reports, they still could give him cause for concern depending on how Wei writes them. So I still think it's sensible for Raymond to want to hear that information personally. While you may also be able to interpret Raymond's concern as a lack of confidence in Wei, this entire situation still doesn't seem that out of the ordinary, yet Wei is acting like he's above all of it. If he really doesn't want a handler, why doesn't he just tell Pendrew that? Still, I like this scene a lot because it gives you all of that to think about. Back at the restaurant, suspicions have never been higher. Popstar's arrest has got these boys pointing fingers at Wei. This is pretty much what I imagined Raymond would have been afraid of when Wei offered Tang help. Luckily, Wei knows just what to do to get himself out of this. He shifts the implication of Popstar's arrest to Ming cutting out the middleman, and also suggests that he's still in bed with Dog Eyes. This causes Winston to completely ignore any evidence against Wei. Not that the evidence was extremely strong, but Winston values loyalty more than anything else. The very idea of Ming taking this opportunity to double-cross Winston is a much bigger deal to him than identifying the exact reason for Popstar's arrest in the first place. Wei reads Winston like a book here, and since Ming doesn't exactly do a very good job of defending himself, he's the one that ends up taking the bullet. While Wei may have managed to save his own ass here, it does confirm the risk he's taking partnering with Tang. So of course, to clear his head, he gives her another visit. She tells him that the street racing scene has been up to some irregular commotion lately. When Wei checks into it, he makes contact with the dude who goes by Hotshot, who's currently beefing with another guy named Ace. Hotshot is obviously up to no good here, so Wei bugs his car and rubbernecks on a conversation he has with an associate. That associate just happening to be the same guy that Wei conducted the drug deal with during the opening, Nas Singh. Hotshot doesn't really mince any words here when talking about what he's going to do to Ace once they finally race, but Wei is also a little concerned that Nas may blow his cover. Nas is just an informant, so he's not exactly loyal to the police force, and he has a hunch that Wei might be a cop. I like how Wei immediately shuts Tang down when she offers to speak with Nas.
No, I agreed to help you, Inspector, but not if it gets me killed. Do everything you can to keep my cover intact. I'll deal with Nas myself.
While he doesn't outright say it, you can tell the scare he had at the restaurant is still in the back of his head. We'll see how things develop with Nas later though. Right now, Wei needs to figure out how to stop Ace's murder from going down. It doesn't seem like he really has a plan for this though, because on the night of the race, Ace is nowhere to be found, and upon calling him, it sounds like Wei showed up a little too late. I love how when Wei is talking to Tang about this, he brushes it off like this wasn't clearly his fault.
Damn it, Wei, we were supposed to catch them in the act.
Yeah, well, they acted too fast.
After gathering evidence at the wreck, Wei challenges Hotshot himself, running him straight into a police blockade and putting his racing career on ice for at least a good while. I think this case is a bit more exciting than the first one, but what's still a little strange to me about it is the large chunks of exposition it seems to leave out. For instance, it never really informs you on how Wei figured out when Hotshot and Ace were going to race. He just wakes up one day and suddenly expects a meeting with Ace. The beef between the two racers is also pretty flimsy as well. After the first meet, Hotshot just kinda pulls up talking mad shit, and Ace just tells him that he'll kick his ass too. Hotshot apparently finds this offensive enough to intentionally end this man's life. I'm also maybe just a bit disappointed on how little the actual racing scene is represented in this case. Like, Wei calls Ace for a race, and then when he shows up, they don't even properly introduce themselves. Straight up, the game just gives you a couple of panning shots and then the race starts. I really wouldn't mind getting to know such prestigious racing heads such as No Break Cho, Low Gear Lee, and Ice Wall. But seriously, some more background dressing during this case I don't think would have hurt. Now that Wei's gotten past this major hurdle of trust with Winston, Raymond instructs him to plant a bug inside the Golden Koi. He accomplishes this without much issue, but manages to catch wind of a conversation between Winston and Conroy, and surprise surprise, Conroy still isn't fully convinced of Wei's intentions. Wei doesn't have much time to think about what Conroy might be up to though, as Tiffany texts him asking for help. Tiffany is a hostess at Club Bam Bam, the same place that Wei harassed like a week ago. Despite that, him and her hit it off pretty well, so she seems to have deemed it appropriate enough to come with him with this problem. A gun! That's it, that's all the problem was. But this isn't just any gun. This is Charlie Pang's gun. Who's Charlie Pang, you may ask? The hell if I know, but he sounds pretty important. Important enough for Pendrew to meet Wei personally over it. He sends Wei through what I can only surmise as being a drug-induced AR reconstruction of a deal gone wrong. He then takes the gun and double taps the already very dead guy in the car. Wei expresses confusion over this, but Pendrew basically explains that he's using this crime scene as a way to frame Charlie, and identifies this act as being a necessary evil. Again, I have no idea who Charlie is, but he seems to be something of Pendrew's Moby Dick. This whole scene is our explanation for why Pendrew has so much confidence in Wei. It also tells us that while Wei isn't afraid of bending the rules to complete his objective, he isn't exactly comfortable with straight up fabricating evidence to do it. But what I really like about this scene is how it shows just how much of a manipulator Pendrew is. He just made Wei go through this whole shooting gallery under the guise that he was just trying to piece things together. He then blabbers on about the greater good when he knows damn well that he's only doing this because he wants to be the guy that caught Charlie Pang. That's some top tier villain shit right there, I'll tell you what. As all of this is happening, word gets out that the Golden Koi just took some damage. It's interesting that this information reaches Wei via Inspector Tang, showing us that she is aware of what Wei's mission is, even if she isn't directly a part of it. But more importantly, it also means that Wei probably wasn't invited to this meeting that Winston is having right now. Wei just kinda shows up, and Conroy doesn't even bother questioning why he's here, even though he basically admits to Conroy that he's out of the loop. If you ask me, if anyone here wasn't asked to show up by Winston himself or another significant gang member, then they shouldn't be here. As far as I understand, Wei has only positioned himself to be Winston's second in command. He isn't exactly there yet, which is something I think Conroy should be acknowledging here, specifically considering he's actually currently Winston's second in command. And to be clear, I'm fine with Winston giving Wei a pass here. I just think it would be a little more appropriate if Conroy continued to antagonize Wei in this moment. Now, Winston ain't exactly happy about this event. As far as he's concerned, this is Dog Eyes declaring war, so he decides that his get-back should be committing some arson on the warehouse Dog Eyes owns. Wei brings it to Winston's attention that the big boss of the Sun On Yee is going to be heated when he finds out about this, and suggests that they should take the warehouse manager and make it look like an ultra-aggressive business move. Winston ultimately agrees to this and the posse mobilizes. On the way to the warehouse, Conroy again expresses his doubts about Wei, but let's be real, Conroy isn't really someone Wei needs to be concerned with. While I do like the shit Conroy gives him and would enjoy seeing more of it, we've already gone over the fact that Winston doesn't really use Conroy as a solid second opinion, so why would he care that Wei has reservations about putting people in the dirt? Despite this, Wei still appeals to Conroy and we get to dropping bodies. Sui Hua obviously doesn't want any of this smoke, so this nigga literally defenestrates himself to avoid capture. Luckily, we are not on the top floor of a high-rise, and it doesn't take long for Wei to find him again and escort him off the premises personally, all while his crew did in fact not wait for his signal and started lighting the place up while he was still inside. After nearly letting Sui Hua slip away, Wei takes him back to Winston, who rewards him for the awesome job tonight, earning Wei more favor with him. If Conroy wasn't scared for his spot before, he probably should be now. Instead, I guess he was just more concerned about Wei being a cop than anything else. There is something admirable about Conroy just giving up his position to someone more capable. I just kinda wish he'd show some more fight over it, I guess. With Wei solidifying himself in the gang, his prediction of this entire night eventually comes true when Winston gets a call from Uncle Po, the chairman of the Sun On Yee. Winston is a huge bundle of nerves over this. He even takes some of it out on Conroy, who he's basically turned into his whipping boy at this point. On the way to Uncle Po's place, Winston gives Wei the keys to his kingdom should anything happen to him, and also gives a speech about what it means to him to be in a brotherhood. It's already been well established that dedication to your clan is something Winston values a lot. The speech is just him verbally confirming the virtue he stood by since the very start of the game. Winston is nothing else if not a consistent character. Loyalty is also something Uncle Po expresses to be a great value as well.
Loyalty, discretion, used to be more common.
I like how when he says this, the camera pans over Winston with an unsure look on his face. While Winston is all about his loyalty, his attack on the warehouse wasn't exactly very discreet. Wei attempts to make Winston look better here by telling Uncle Po that Sui Hua's capture was Winston's idea. The chairman doesn't seem that convinced over this information, but still sends Wei home early with some good boy points and tells him about a man named Roland Ho, a debt collector that could use some help with his clientele. We're also introduced to Ricky here, who tells Wei that he's got potential, so of course we'll see more of him later. The job that Wei does for Roland isn't really that significant, since Roland is just a side character and this mission is literally just to introduce his side activity, but he does give Wei a tip on how to take on bosses in his own triad. After delivering a car full of coke, which I am not going to explain how Wei got his hands on, it's time to meet with Raymond again. So this guy is pretty pissed about what happened in the warehouse attack. Wei argues that this is just how operations like this are going to go. Raymond isn't budging though, and threatens to end the entire mission. In a moment of desperation, Wei tells Raymond that he just met the Sun On Yee's Dai Lo, which causes Raymond to reconsider and leaves their relationship at a stalemate. What I like about this scene is that this time around, Wei is the one attempting to be amicable while Raymond is the aggressor, who's more than likely experiencing some kind of confirmation bias here. Having already expressed reservations about Wei as an operative, he was basically just waiting for the right moment, even though Wei hasn't really done anything that any other gangster wouldn't have. Raymond is just more concerned that Wei isn't doing this for the good of the mission. What's interesting here is that a lot of the information Raymond is ignoring now is information he could actually be getting from Wei's reports. While I don't think it's necessary for Wei to get personal about his mental state in the police report, I do think recounting things like whether or not any civilians were harmed in the attack is something that sensationalized news doesn't always focus on because it can't really tell the difference between a gang member and an innocent person. And it's not like Wei can really stop Winston from doing all of this, which is what Wei's first-hand accounts would have better insight on if he actually takes writing police reports seriously, which it seems like he does. So knowing what he's putting in them I think is a lot more important when it comes to evaluating his performance on this mission than just reading the newspapers saying that the warehouse event was a bloodbath. I mean, it was a bloodbath, but the only blood that got spilt was from the people that were asking for it as far as Wei is concerned. Winston's getting hitched. How's that for some whiplash? Winston's mom, Mrs. Chu, tasks Wei with driving Winston's fiancée around the city. I'm not kidding. He helps Peggy go get her dress ready, picks up the cake, and even steals a flower that exclusively grows at a restricted area in Hong Kong. While this mission does have action in it, its core concept is the conversations Wei has with Peggy as he chauffeurs her around. Functionally, it allows the audience to get to know Peggy's character, who is somewhat of an obnoxious perfectionist. Maybe not as obnoxious as the
crazy-ass bitch
who attempted to steal her cake, but enough to make Wei do a little trespassing and cheek clapping in order to satisfy her superstitions. Other than that, she seems like a nice woman who can look past Winston's flaws. My favorite part is when the cake is being hijacked, she seems to be completely in the dark about what could be happening.
The guy had the wrong address. Winston asked me to make sure the cake is delivered.
He's so thoughtful.
She then proceeds to go full panic mode when it's revealed that her perfect wedding could be at risk.
Peggy, if we don't catch that band, you won't have your special cake at your wedding.
What? Faster, go faster.
If you're a fan of love stories and your gangster fiction, then you could probably already guess that this one doesn't have a happy ending, and it comes pretty quick and concise. The matrimony has barely even started yet before the whole place gets jumped by unknown assailants, supposedly masquerading as the catering service it seems. Wei is unable to save Winston and Peggy, but manages to catch Uncle Po in critical condition, escorting him to the nearby hospital. There's always something captivating about wedding murders in gangster fiction. The most joyous day of someone's life coming to a gruesomely abrupt end while everyone that they know and love either screams in horror or even goes with them. Just makes you ask, what kind of monster would do something like this on a day that's supposed to represent unification? And while that question may never truly get a definitive answer, my question is, what the hell was this catering service, bro? Whoever was behind this attack either hijacked a real catering service for this event, or someone forgot to check the Better Business Bureau. Real talk, the only thing I'm really disappointed by is the fact that we don't actually get to see Winston and Peggy's assassinations. Well, I mean, technically you do, but it's not exactly the main focus of the scene. In fact, you don't even really see these two interact with each other at all throughout the whole game. So all the player really has to go off of is Peggy's word on how Winston acts around her, which I think makes the impact of their murders a little less effective. Still, a wedding massacre is a wedding massacre, and someone's gotta pay for it, but not before we talk to Raymond again. These discussions between him and Wei have pretty much been going nowhere at this point. Raymond will express his concern about Wei, and then Wei will call his bullshit. Let's be honest, an undercover job like this would take no less than a few years to execute successfully, and Wei has managed to make this much progress in like, what, a few months, give or take? While it's understandable that Raymond would possibly be concerned about Wei switching sides here, the level of ignorance he's displaying is just a little frustrating, even for a character that's just supposed to be a dumb desk jockey. The only argument he seems to have against Wei is that he isn't acting like what he believes a cop should act like, while continuously neglecting to read Wei's reports. I don't really find this to be a very good defense for all the whining he does. I think what Raymond needs is similar to what I believe Tripp needed in the Enslaved video, either a more personal reason for why he wants to undermine the Sun On Yee, or why he believes Wei is heading down the wrong path. Simply just saying he isn't acting like a cop when he's supposed to be acting like a gangster doesn't cut it, if you ask me. I also don't think it hurt if Raymond actually asked Wade what his plan is. While moving up in the ranks extremely quickly is all well and good, we still don't really know what Wade's endgame is, which kind of makes him look like he's just improvising all of this. This entire situation doesn't strike me as Raymond's first rodeo. The guy's gotta have some history with other people he's worked with that possibly displayed the same tendencies as Wade, and those previous partnerships did not end well. Eventually revealing something like this, I believe, would at least give him a better reason for why he acts like he's Wade's mom all the time. Seriously, it's like he's trying to put Wade in time out every time they meet, the way he threatens to end this excursion, and then Wade will be like, "End these nuts," which will cause Raymond to give a look of uncertainty like he just got told some goofy shit in a South Park episode. With Winston gone, Mrs. Chu's hit a funk. And of course, when a mother hits a funk over their child, there's only one way she knows how to solve it: more violence. She's the type that likes to deal with her issues personally. I like how this scene takes note of the bug Wade planted earlier, and I think he's actively turning it off here. As far as I understand, Mrs. Chu wasn't Sun On Yee, she was just the mother of a Sun On Yee. So there isn't a huge reason to record anything she may have to say, but that still doesn't make her any less of a gangster, as Wade happens to know one of the gunmen at the wedding, and after tracking him down, Mrs. Chu does the rest.
Okay, I'll tell you anything you want to know. Just please, don't!
While she has her fun, Wade has some business to attend to as the new gang leader. A messenger of Big Smile Lee approaches him with an offer. Well, it's not much of an offer as it is a financial takeover. Wade vehemently rejects this and we get to more brapping. I'm not really sure how this club manages to stay in business with the amount of gang activity it's seen in just the last month or so. Big Smile Lee is obviously doing this to intimidate Wade. Since Uncle Po is in the hospital, there's nothing stopping him from attempting to strong-arm other gang leaders. Now, I'm no gang expert or anything, but I surmise that the reason most gangs usually choose clubs as an HQ to work out of is because rival gangs usually understand that it's not really worth attacking their enemies in them. Not only does this possibly screw with the money either gang could be making from it, it's also just way too risky with how many innocent people that populate them on the nightly. Big Smile Lee doesn't seem too concerned with any of this though and just goes scorched earth on the place. After catching the guy in charge of this aggressive move, Wei is saved from a possible arrest by Broken Nose Zhang, another Sun On Yee Red Pole. She gives Wei a rundown of what's at stake. With Uncle Po out of commission, the entire syndicate hangs in the balance. Wei has already just witnessed how power-hungry Big Smile Lee is, and Zhang suggests that they should team up in order to remove Lee from the equation. She believes she'd make a much better chairman than Lee should Uncle Po bite it. While it isn't overt, Wei simply putting forth the idea that Zhang could be the new chairman I think is a good sign that Wei has no real interest in taking over the Sun On Yee himself, which is at least one concern Raymond can cross off of his list for Wei. It's pretty clear though that Wei has bigger problems than Raymond, like dealing with Jackie's dumbass.
16 times the detail.
It seems like the guys he's been making regular transactions with pulled a fast one on him this time. This is how you know Jackie is the little brother. He doesn't really have any intentions of solving this problem himself, he just hits up Wei to do it for him. But I suppose that's kind of what being in a gang is for.
So you ain't never got to worry about handling shit like a man. Yeah, man.
Luckily, this gives Wei the chance to confront Nas personally, the police informant we talked about earlier during the Hotshot case. It doesn't take very long for them to reveal what they know about each other, quite loudly I might add. Like, what are these dudes chilling in the background supposed to make of this? Also, Jackie must not know that the 18K apparently run this place, or else I don't think he'd be making business transactions with them. Nas attempts to escape, but Wei manages to blow shit up in order to catch him. He brings him back to Tang, who says she'll take care of him, but not before Wei finishes him off.
Hey, show the lady some respect.
If you were expecting Nas to have a bigger role in this story, then you were sorely mistaken. This game is more about the internal conflict the Sun On Yee has than its beefs with rival gangs, so it's not like the story has much room to involve a character from a rival gang. It just makes it that much more convenient for Wei that he's able to do this to Nas with very little issue. Like, Nas doesn't even try to cut a deal with Wei, he just instantly gets aggressive with him because he didn't realize that Wei would know he's an informant, which seems a little short-sighted because why wouldn't the police tell an undercover cop that there's an informant on the field? If Nas suspects Wei to be a cop, then he has to realize this as well. Instead, this guy just automatically thinks he has the high ground and gets punished for it as a result. Plus, who does Nas think the Sun On Yee will believe at this juncture? The guy that literally just ran through like 60 niggas for the sake of his gang's grand leader? Or some jackass from a rival gang that can't keep his mouth shut? Again, this story doesn't have much room to feature a lot of external gang warfare, but that doesn't mean it still isn't just a little disappointing how Nas's character was utilized here, I think. Since Wei stopped by with a present for Tang, she returns the favor by giving him another case. A suspicious number of Triad members have been found dead by the waterfront. Tang finds this to be more than just gang-related and implores Wei to check it out. After inspecting the bodies, he finds that all of them have been harvested of an organ, and laments on the fact that one of them was someone he knew. He decides that the best course of action is to jump into a doctor disguise and poke his nose around the hospital.
What are you doing here? It's not for me to make that call.
You in the habit of challenging doctors, nurse? I'm saving lives. What are you doing here?
He technically isn't lying. He could actually be saving lives right now, just a whole bunch of would-be gangsters' lives, which doesn't exactly go against the doctor's code of saving a life regardless of who that life belongs to. Dr. Sang, our suspect, doesn't seem too keen on upholding this code though, and evidence suggests he has ties with the 18K. It's then revealed that Dr. Sang is scheduled to perform a kidney transplant, with the donor of said kidney being Calvin, another person in Wei's gang. Now, Calvin is a pretty minor character with some huge balls. Comically huge, even. This guy loves causing chaos, but doesn't know how to drive worth a damn. The player wouldn't really know any of this though unless they've done some of the side activities that feature him, so your attachment to this character could vary from player to player. Calvin is a homie though, and Wei's not gonna let a homie's organs get stolen on his watch, so he intercepts the car transporting Calvin and puts it in a safe place. And that's it. That's the end of the case. This one felt kind of rushed. You could pretty much say that for every case so far, but this one especially, I think. The biggest moment of awkward pacing for me is when Wei is meant to call Tang about the transplant. I wasn't expecting this call to be so urgent, which is why I had to carjack somebody afterwards, because when you're on a mission, you apparently can't call your valet to deliver a ride to you. I don't know why the game identifies this as theft. This is obviously important police business. I guess the game just expects you to immediately call Tang after getting out of the hospital, but Wei already called her before that mission ended, informing her about the bug he just planted. Why would Wei be the one to call Tang again about the transplant? Wouldn't it be the other way around? Like, yeah, Wei may have gotten a look at Sang's schedule, but that supposed information isn't really that important to the player, or at least the game doesn't make it feel important enough to tip the player off that something urgent might be happening soon. So when Wei just calls Tang out of the blue about the upcoming surgery, it made me feel like I missed something. I think an adjustment you could make here while still keeping the advancement of this case totally in the player's hands is to just have Wei also tell Tang that he got a hold of Sang's schedule, and that he'll be calling her later when the next surgery is about to go down. It's also really funny when Wei hijacks the car carrying Calvin. The dude driving it just gives up the wheel to Wei, panics, and then apparently falls asleep. Wei doesn't even tell him to get out of the car. Dude literally just passes out from fear, I'm guessing. Regardless, Wei still made the streets a little safer for every gangster in the city, so it's time to check back with our favorite gangster mama. She tells Wei that Dog Eyes was the one behind Winston's murder. Not exactly a super shocking development in terms of what we know about Winston's enemies, but one that's still flabbergasting character-wise. In a very candid moment of honesty, Mrs. Chu actually admits that she pushed Winston into being a gangster, meaning that she probably feels a bigger sense of responsibility for his fate than the average parent would in the same situation. So it's only right for her to be the one to deliver Dog Eyes' punishment. Chasing him down, Wei literally puts Dog Eyes through the wall and then takes him back to Mrs. Chu.
Oh God! I'm sorry, please! No!
So, Dog Eyes is a pretty slimy character with little backbone, right? Like, this guy refuses to take responsibility for pretty much anything. Even when Wei calls him out for Winston and Peggy's murders, he still doesn't really admit to it, and instead tries to talk himself out of any retribution for it. Everything to him is just business, and the moment he convinces you of this, he'll go right back to trying to aggressively take over your business. Whether or not any of this is personal doesn't really matter. Dog Eyes is just a greasy business person, much like the guy who reps him. Wei understands this, so while there may be personal implications here, getting rid of Dog Eyes would only be a good thing since it cripples the Sun On Yee's power and kind of acts like a mini-boss for Wei before dealing with Lee. Now, what Raymond would be worried about here is how Wei is doing it. He's not exactly just trying to get Dog Eyes arrested and thrown in prison for Winston's murder. He basically just takes Mrs. Chu at her word. For all we know, Johnny Ratface could have been lying himself. But this is also what makes Wei a good gangster. The whole idea of being one is having the capability to take care of problems without law enforcement's assistance. And Dog Eyes would have eventually become a problem for Wei that would have taken law enforcement much too long to solve. This high gangster IQ is exactly what ends up making Wei a Red Pole, and for his initiation, he's tasked with making an example out of a Sun On Yee betrayer. It's also at the hospital here that a temporary chairman is picked. Uncle Po is at a loss for who he should go with, but before Lee can say anything, Zhang suggests Tu Chen is their best bet. I'm honestly curious as to what made Lee so hesitant to speak up. Maybe it was out of respect for Uncle Po to not look too hasty, or maybe he thinks the temp job isn't enough at first, but then decides it's better than nothing and just isn't quick enough on the draw. At any rate, I'm surprised he's not quietly bickering with Zhang for stepping on his toes. Meanwhile, Wei collects Jackie from a massage parlor and they go to settle things with this betrayer. In the scuffle, Jackie splits this guy's wig, which is something he's never done before, and is more than just a little freaked out about it.
I didn't expect it to be like that. I always thought about how it looked. I didn't know how it made me feel, you know? I can feel it in my stomach. Shit, Wei!
While this is the first time we've seen Jackie use a gun, it isn't the first time he's been in a gunfight. I just kinda wonder whether or not he's always had this gun on him or he's just recently picked it up. Like, did someone pull him aside one day and hand him a gun telling him he needs to learn how to use it? Or was it a decision he made for himself? Being the little brother of the gang makes me think that most other people probably would have clowned him for thinking about using a gun, and possibly even told him to reconsider. His reaction to using it only reinforces this theory to me. Wei tells Jackie to settle down, but I think he should also be reminding Jackie that he just saved his life as well. Acknowledging that is something that I think would be very appropriate for their relationship. While Wei does treat Jackie like the little bro, he still respects him, possibly more than most other people. Why else would he choose Jackie over literally anyone else to do this job with him? Wei is Jackie's best friend, so I think it'd be a really cool moment if Wei told him that he just saved his friend's life, even if it meant taking someone else's at the time. After their initiation, which Wei's gotta be sweating hard over.
Betray your brothers, and you will die 1,000 times over, slowly, in the dark.
He meets up with Raymond again. He tells him that he's finally read his report for once. Wei cracks a well-deserved joke about this, but Raymond is all business. Pinju is asking Wei to get some dirt on a guy named Sonny Wo, which is cool, but then Raymond tells Wei they'll be arresting Jackie, which Wei takes issue with. Raymond is a lot more subdued here, but you can tell he still doesn't fully respect Wei's method of doing things. Wei also still doesn't fully trust Raymond either, since he neglects to tell him what he did with Dog Eyes. Seems like this relationship took one step forward and 2 steps back at this juncture. Sometime later, Wei and Jackie get together again to do another job, some more thievery, what Jackie knows best. He even admits that these are the kind of gigs he likes doing the most, and although he almost gets kidnapped in this one, he still handles himself well enough. What's looking to be a decent payday ends up turning into a bust when the police follow through on Raymond's word and arrest Jackie. Now, he thinks he's being arrested because he got caught with all this jewelry, which again, may or may not be fake, but Wei knows the real reason. Arresting Jackie presents a difference in how Wei and Pinju want to operate. Wei doesn't want to pull the rug out from under the Sun On Yee until the very last moment, while Pinju wants to slowly tug at it inch by inch. If Pinju truly believes Wei can pull this job off, then it's probably better to respect his wishes and leave Jackie alone, but he doesn't do that. So Pinju must really believe that Jackie is some kind of easily accessible knowledge fountain, because I don't see how they could get any information out of him that Wei couldn't get himself. But Wei's got more than just Jackie to protect when the 18K attack the hospital looking for Uncle Po. This situation pretty much boils down to just 2 guys against several waves of thugs. I'd be pretty pissed too if I was the only guy doing anything to protect our gang's grand leader, but it's not like Wei contacted Duke or Conroy about this after Ricky called him, and Ricky apparently doesn't have any other friends in this gang besides Wei. This gives Wei the perfect opportunity to suggest that there might be something bigger going on than just some beef between the Sun On Yee and 18K, which has definitely gotta be part of this manipulation strategy. And while I may be giving the fiction a little too much credit here, Wei is still very much manipulating Ricky, since he gives Wei direct access to that Sonny Wo dude. Sonny is a character. The guy literally will not shut up about banging women. He's a bit of an over-dramatized version of what people think personalities in the entertainment industry act like on the daily. but considering where we're at today, that might not be too far off. Sunny sets Wei up with King, a record producer from the States who's currently collaborating with another artist here in Hong Kong. King reveals that he's also gang affiliated back in the States, and this production gig is mostly just a front to make some connects between his gang and the Triads. Wei approves of this, not only because they both agree that Sunny is a creep, but also because it gets him that much closer to Sunny. So in order to give King a good tour around the city, Wei gets him some girls at the bar and then beats up some thugs in the parking lot. King never makes another appearance in the game once the night is over, but the final dialogue between him and Wei suggests that things may have been planned for him in a sequel. It's interesting how a lot of the games I've gone over so far had a lot of pre-production ready for a sequel before it was canned. Oh, what we could have had. Instead, all we get right now is more errands to run. Sunny sends Wei to pick up Vivian and Sandra from a shopping boutique. This cutscene doesn't skip on the shots of Ricky showing concern over Vivian whenever Sunny mentions her. The man has clearly caught feelings for her despite how much Sunny treats her like a toy that he can pass around to whoever he feels like. Vivian is the artist that King is collabing with, and isn't exactly happy that Wei is the one picking her up instead of Ricky. Her feelings for Ricky are mutual, but it also seems like Vivian is very familiar with the games Sunny likes to play. So she probably isn't just mad that some random guy came to get her, but also that this random guy was possibly sent by Sunny to screw with her. Sandra consoles Vivian, but also seizes this opportunity to be extremely flirtatious. The contrast between these two ladies is stark. Vivian is technically wifey material, but is being manipulated by a sleazy executive, making her less appealing since she's not really in control of her sexual relationships. Meanwhile, Sandra is a lot more willfully promiscuous, and is in full control of her sex life, but also probably has little issue with playing with guys' emotions.
This is your new boyfriend?
Not yet. Why? Are you jealous?
You wonder how these two are even friends, since this contrast makes it very likely that Sandra would have attempted to steal Vivian's boyfriend at some point. I guess she just respects Vivian and Ricky's relationship enough to not try anything. What she doesn't respect as much is Vivian's time, much like this video, and since she's in the boyfriend seat tonight, she tells Wei to do a little street racing to satiate her lust for speed. The exchange that happens when they reach the meetup is kinda what I was hoping we'd get from the second Teng case. Endearing, almost cartoonish levels of jaw-jacking that only a street race bet can provide.
First I'm gonna take your ride, then I'm gonna take your girl.
Not all of the girls in the city can afford to be as fast and loose as Sandra though, which is why Ileana, an employee Wei met at the bar he took King to, gives him a call about her friend,
Katushka!
She's gone missing, and Ileana wants Wei to look into it. Wei brings this case to Tang, who's currently having an entanglement with the political side of the justice system, and as a result, doesn't really argue with the initiative Wei is taking. Wei links up with Ileana back at the K-bar, and she tells him about a guy named Mr. Chan, who's happy to cooperate with Wei after throwing his weight around a bit, although the girls he's with still seem to have a lot of his attention.
Yes!
We find plenty of evidence at the address Mr. Chan coughed up, and by plenty of evidence, I mean a phone number. While there are clear signs of struggle all over the place with objects that you could maybe run for fingerprints, or cross-check the entire apartment with other similar crime scenes that may have been located around the city, the only thing Wei apparently needed here was some digits that allow him to identify a possible suspect. A one Yar Kwai Lai, rumored smuggler for the 18K, whose name would fit right at home in a Star Wars movie. He also happens to have a gambling addiction that Wei takes advantage of. I love how Wei doesn't run any of this by Ileana until he's basically already sold her to this guy. Like, what is stopping Wei from calling her and telling her what the deal is first? While the game may assume that her and Wei are good friends at this point, the player may have only seen them casually interact that one time at the bar before, if they neglected to do her side activity. So it's a little strange how much blind trust she's putting in Wei. I'm not saying she needs to be against being the bait here, I'm just saying she could possibly be a little more offended that she was offered as bait without her acknowledgement, which would only force Wei to better sell the situation to her. We understand that it's for the sake of
Katushka!
But how does Ileana know this is even the right guy, or whether or not Wei is trying to double-cross her? She recognizes that foreign women, especially illegal ones, are a lot more susceptible to being taken advantage of in Hong Kong. So what makes Wei so special that she's willing to let her guard down so easily with him? Either way, Ileana is on board, and after handing her over to Lai, Wei locates the girl's holding cell, where he's accosted by a group of gun-toting gangsters. But they're little more than a formality that comes before Wei freeing the girls and getting them back to safety. Tang then reveals how this entire sex trafficking ring was going under the radar, and thanks Wei for everything he's done. This case is about as good as the last one. While it didn't feel like I was missing any super important information while I was playing it, it still feels just as rushed. All of these cases had to have been something United Front either thought up last minute, or didn't have enough time or money to flesh out more. The concepts they explore are intriguing, but they're over with so fast, they don't really give themselves much space to dig into the ideas presented. Despite this, I still mostly enjoy the dynamic between Inspector Tang and Wei. While she starts out unconvinced of Wei's true intentions, she eventually comes around. Although, I do find it kind of strange how she treats him during the organ snatcher case specifically, telling him to keep his head in the game at first when the possibility that one of his boys might be involved, and then being more sympathetic toward him when that ends up being the case. It blurs the line between whether or not Wei is actually getting attached to these gangsters in a way that Tang doesn't really bother challenging him on to any significant degree. I suppose you could say that's what we have Raymond for, but I still question why Tang would take the time to emphasize how friendly Wei has gotten with these people when she knows they all lie, cheat, steal, and kill on a daily basis. I think it'd be a great opportunity to show how much their morals differ on this subject. Wei may be helping her, but that doesn't mean she has to like the people he's associating himself with. She's a better cop than most because she can recognize the difference between doing her duty and being up in her feelings, something that Raymond tends to ignore doing pretty often in contrast, meaning she can still treat gangbangers like human beings without being so blatantly sympathetic to Wei in the process, you know, which I believe would only further strengthen their dynamic, since Tang is already meant to be a straight shooter that doesn't baby Wei as much as Raymond does, so I don't think Wei should really be expecting much sympathy from her, at least at first. With all that said, all the cases for Tang are now wrapped up, so it's time to get back to official Sun On Yee business. Broken Nose expresses her displeasure with how comfortable Tu Chen has been at the helm. She theorizes that if something were to happen to Uncle Po, and if this trend continues, Tu Chen could be made permanent chairman. This is probably worse for Tu Chen than it is for the Syndicate in the short term, because both Wei and Zhang know that Big Smile Lee will do something to forcibly remove Chen from his position, so Zhang suggests that they should unknowingly influence Chen to voluntarily step down. How she plans on doing this is by fucking up the feng shui. Literally. She sends Wei to ransack this guy's house and make him think that the spirits aren't happy with him. In spite of how goofy this mission is, I still like it a lot because of the goofy character that joins you during it. Old Salty Crab is a pretty unorthodox dude who sometimes forgets to think before he speaks.
Wow, you're pretty and talented.
What?
I say you're pretty talented.
Oh, okay, sure. You too, Salty.
He's here to give Wei tips on feng shui and how to sufficiently ruin it. Of course, a lot of the things he's having Wei do just seem like things a careless home invader would do, but he's the expert, I guess. After successfully bringing a bad omen, and performing probably the most scuffed version of the Dukes of Hazzard you've ever seen, Zhang calls Wei to inform him of Uncle Po's passing. They've got some time to make adjustments before the funeral, but things are obviously moving faster than expected. Meanwhile, Sunny's grip on Vivian is getting more and more aggressive. In order to keep an eye on her, Sunny instructs Wei to set up some spy equipment in her apartment. Of course, he doesn't actually tell Wei whose apartment it is. The only hint that Wei gets that it might possibly be Vivian's is the text he gets from Sunny a bit later with some aggressive wording. And you know, the big fat portrait of her in it. Not to mention this clearly misspelled poster of a movie she was apparently the lead actress of. Wei doesn't have time to consider any of this though. He's here to plant bugs and ask questions later, and the answer to the question he didn't bother asking eventually comes waltzing through the door anyway. It's just funny how Wei reacts to this information like he had no clue.
Shit. Fucking Sunny.
Sunny isn't exactly the most subtle dude on the planet, so you can kinda tell the only reason he's being ambiguous about this covert job is because the game wants the reveal to come here. But that still doesn't explain why the environmental designers thought it necessary to put all this memorabilia of her around. This either has to be some kind of miscommunication between the designers and the writers, or someone made an oopsies. Wei doesn't even make a passing comment about any of the pictures on the wall, yet he can literally use her bathroom before completing any of the required actions in the apartment. It's not like Wei would have refused to do this job if he knew it was Vivian's place, so I'm not really sure why the fiction is going out of its way to make him look ignorant about it. Narrowly escaping the apartment before being trapped in the closet, Wei meets up with Pendrew and confronts him about Jackie. Pendrew obviously isn't very concerned about Jackie and only wants to know what's going on with Sunny. He also thanks Wei for getting Tang out of his hair, which confuses me because I thought Tang was only here to make sure she doesn't spill the beans on this operation. How would Wei's assistance affect this? Anyway, it takes Wei a minute to cool down, but he eventually tells Pendrew about the situation with Vivian. Pendrew wants a copy of some footage from the spy camera Wei just planted. In exchange, Wei requests for Jackie's release. Pendrew accepts this deal, which more than likely means Jackie isn't proving to be the source of knowledge Pendrew thought he was. As Wei is grabbing the footage, he gets an unexpected guest. Sunny sent Vivian to him, assumedly as a reward for having just rigged her apartment. She's unable to go through with it though, and starts to get nervous about what Sunny will do to her. Wei already has a good idea of what that'll be and assures Vivian that he's uninterested in taking advantage of her, though it's still a little unclear how disappointed Sunny will be about this, considering just how hell-bent he was on getting Wei to bang Vivian, but as long as no one gets sent to the porno mines, it's all good. Wei gets that footage back to Pendrew, who tells him that his mission is now officially over. Wei disagrees, however. There's still Big Smile Lee to deal with. Pendrew doesn't seem to see Lee as a huge threat though, and just equates this concern to Wei's personal bias, which is something a few people have been telling him for pretty much the whole game, so I can imagine he's probably tired of hearing it at this point. But he is taking a huge risk doing this. Not only is he voluntarily putting himself in more danger, he could also lose his badge, since he technically isn't operating as a police officer anymore. Nothing that he does after this moment is liable to be recognized as crucial to the mission, since Pendrew just ended it. He gives Wei fair warning on this, but as far as still being a cop is concerned, Wei might actually be lucky that Pendrew is a petty bastard, because instead of trying to strip Wei of his badge, he just enables a shootout between the Sun On Yee and 18K at Uncle Po's funeral.
The 18K are about to do this city a great public service, and anyone who stays here deserves everything they get.
Tensions have never been higher. The 18K is getting bolder and bolder, and Tu Chen didn't even bother showing up to this funeral. Lee attempts to assert himself as chairman, but Zhang stops him short again. Uncle Po isn't here to prevent these two from arguing this time though, so Lee goes fully unhinged, but the consensus stands that they should have an election as the tradition dictates. Lee makes it clear that he's no longer interested in patiently waiting for his rise in power, so he sends some hit squads out to start influencing his votes. It's absolute pandemonium in the streets. Dudes is taking cleavers to the back, buckshot to the face. It's so over the top, I'm surprised they only gave you a grenade launcher again and not a full-on RPG this time. With Big Smile Lee on the offensive, Wei's #1 concern right now is making sure Ricky doesn't join him. If you weren't convinced yet that Ricky has feelings for Vivian, then you should be now when he gets up in them about Wei and her. Vivian sets the record straight and also accuses Ricky of not really being any better than what he's accusing Wei to be, so it's not like Ricky has any room to speak. I like how stupid this makes Ricky look in a good way. Bro is really out here acting like Sunny doesn't habitually talk about Vivian like she's an object just because her and Wei might have done something at the request of Sunny. Ricky is just mad jealous of the idea that Wei might have banged Vivian better than him, which is what makes it extra satisfying when Vivian calls him out on his bullshit. What value does Sunny's word even have in this situation when he's clearly the guy that makes Vivian do all of it? I'm honestly surprised she doesn't completely snap out on Ricky for being such a dumbass. I've been snapped out on for assuming much less about girls in the past, so if you ask me, this guy got off easy. I'm not really sure why Wei would want to, but somehow Raymond convinces him to show up for another meeting. This one is totally off the books. Raymond chose to do this himself because he's afraid of what Pendrew will do if Wei doesn't follow his orders. Before Wei can consider Raymond's offer to come in without incident, he gets a call from Jackie's kidnappers. Jackie hasn't been seen since the day of the funeral. I'm not really sure how this managed to get by Wei considering he drove Jackie to the funeral, so I feel like he should be showing a bit more concern about his disappearance. At least more concern than he shows before he gets this phone call, which is pretty much zero. Wei obviously gets jumped at the location he was told to go to, but that doesn't stop him from tracking down the guy in charge of all this and saving Jackie from being buried alive. Jackie explains that he got taken during the funeral by Big Smile Lee, so this must have been some sort of contingency plan for him if Wei refused the offer to work for him again and managed to survive the initial assault. Shaken up from everything that's happened in just the last couple of months really, Jackie officially calls it quits on being a gangster. Just as well, he was obviously never really cut out to be one. Before Wei showed up, he was, at best, an errand boy for Winston. He wasn't exactly the guy you'd call to back you up in a gunfight, and he's not exactly that great at solving issues by himself. He's the perfect example of someone who blindly idolizes the life of being a thug without really understanding what it actually takes to be one on a daily basis. The guy only just recently caught his first body, and he's been losing sleep over it ever since. Despite the numerous times he's been shot at himself, this is what starts giving him nightmares. He's just a goofy, easily influenceable kid that I don't want to say fell into the wrong crowd exactly, but was still lucky enough to be taken advantage of by that crowd in a way that kept him protected for the most part. He's the little brother that you push around while not giving him anything too hard to do, you know?
I don't even know how to ride this thing. I gotta push it here.
Wei makes one final request of Jackie to appear at the election and tell everyone what Lee did to him. Jackie accepts this for Wei's sake, but Wei should have also put Jackie under heavy witness protection because the very next day he finds him strung up and disemboweled. This time, Lee hires an actual professional to deal with Wei. This still doesn't stop him though. The guy is basically RoboCop at this point. He literally took a power drill to the knee and still manages to fight his way past a bunch of goons. Skyrim NPCs have no excuse. Wei is fed up with the bullshit and decides to go after Lee himself. Right now. No backup, doesn't even take any proper time to heal from his wounds. Like any good gangster, an Armani suit and the gat is all he needs. Narratively, Wei may have a decent reason for doing this by himself. Pendrew went ahead and blew Wei's cover to Lee, and since Wei doesn't exactly know how fast his word has traveled around the Sun On Yee at this point, it's unclear whether or not the rest of his crew would be willing to help. In any case, during the final confrontation, Lee reveals that Wei was supposed to die during the wedding massacre as well. I'm not really sure why Lee would be that concerned about Wei back then, or Winston for that matter. We can guess why Dog Eyes would want to get rid of Winston, but why would Lee also ask him to get rid of Wei? Maybe he also suspected Wei to be a cop at the time, or maybe he just saw how much more powerful he was making Winston's gang. Lee also comments on how Wei screwed Jackie over. This is a double-edged sword. Technically, if Wei hadn't gotten Jackie out of custody, this would have never happened to him, and by extension, Wei should have assigned Jackie some bodyguards. You can't just have your number one witness aimlessly roaming the streets unprotected after he just had his life threatened. But this is just as much Lee's fault as it is Wei's. Lee knows for a fact he would not be winning any election by normal means, which is why he's doing all this extra shit. The dude is obviously scared that more people hate him than fear him, and will vote against him in spite. And of course, the only reason Wei is doing this is because he went after Jackie. So Wei throws Lee into an ice chipper and calls it a day. Still at the crime scene, Raymond tells Wei that Pendrew got a promotion and assures him that his standing with the Triad will be fine, I guess. I'm not really sure why that matters at this point, since Wei shouldn't really feel the need to associate with them anymore, unless he's afraid that the Triad will still attempt to assassinate him because he's been lying to them this whole time, which honestly sounds more likely.
Slowly, in the dark.
There's like zero reason Wei should ever be operating in Hong Kong anymore after this. Zhang may be kind enough to leave Wei alone, but I doubt he'll ever be on good speaking terms with the Triad ever again. And it's not like anybody associated with the people he's crossed paths with still wouldn't develop a personal vendetta against him, whether or not they even believe he's a cop. Which I doubt Zhang would feel that inclined to protect Wei from, unless she has future plans to make use of him. But it wouldn't exactly be very wise to allow a crime boss to hold that kind of power over an officer, despite how dope that kind of sequel bait sounds. If Wei intends to continue working as a cop, then the only logical move I feel is to relocate him to another country again, because even if he identifies Hong Kong as his home, you can't just have a police officer with known ties to the Triad keep operating with that Triad when there's no longer a reason for him to do so, and it only puts a bigger target on Wei's back if definitive evidence of him being a police officer gets into the Triad's hands, which is something Zhang could pull the trigger on any damn time she wants, if she feels like Wei is causing problems for her as a police officer. So my ultimate question for this story is, did Wei even really accomplish what he wanted? The Sun On Yee is crippled but still very much operable, and Broken Nose is definitely a more desirable leader than Big Smile Lee, at face value anyway, but I don't see how that makes the Sun On Yee any less of a criminal threat. While Broken Nose is against things like sex trafficking, she still supports supplying illegal drugs to the streets and beefing with the 18K, which is only going to continue to cause their own problems. I thought Wei came here to
take down the Sun On Yee, not to shuffle the deck.
Plus, in terms of shuffling that deck, what if Pendrew never offed Uncle Po? Would there even be a deck to shuffle if Uncle Po never died? Zhang was still perfectly fine with having Uncle Po continue to run things if he made it out of the hospital. So what kind of goal would Wei have then if this were to be the case? Even Lee seemed uninterested in challenging Po's authority, but he was still fine picking a fight with Wei. Lee probably still would have been the biggest threat to Wei because of this, but since Lee isn't that interested in taking the spot away from Po, little will have changed after either Wei or Lee die anyway. So I'm not really sure how this counts as taking down the Sun On Yee. It actually kind of feels like Wei is fixing all of the problems it had, not sending it into even more disorganization and ultimately letting it implode on itself, which makes it seem like the syndicate was already broken before Wei even got there. So all of the characters telling Wei that he was making things too personal may have had a point. Cause how Wei ultimately operates in this story does make me feel like he has something personal going on, but it's not just about the triads necessarily. I wouldn't be surprised if Wei also had some doubters with big mouths on the force constantly telling him that he's a trash police officer, and this undercover job is his way of proving them wrong, which is why he goes above and beyond with it. I mean, hell, Raymond was his biggest doubter, and even he eventually came around. So obviously all this talk of him not having the mental fortitude to properly execute a mission like this is wrong, right? Speaking of Wei's mental state, I also think that's a bit of a missed opportunity for this story. While there are some nods to the idea of Wei attempting to maintain a healthy psyche in the game, mostly during the segments where he replays quotes from various characters in his head, I wouldn't say this game takes an especially deep dive into the mental toll that happens when conducting field work like this. While Wei may wake up in cold sweats numerous times throughout the game, it's not like this guy is shakily taking drugs to manage his PTSD, as well as any other mental issues he may be suffering from. He kind of just gets up out of bed, mumbles to himself, and looks around the place for a little bit before he jumps right back into the grind. It'd be nice to see Wei display a bit more mental instability, either in cutscenes or moment-to-moment gameplay. For instance, if you roll with the idea of Tang being a straight shooter that doesn't much care for Wei's feelings, you could easily have Wei briefly step out of line during a discussion with her about how she references dead gangsters in his crew. I've already mentioned how this case in particular is pretty ambiguous about how much Wei's gang actually means to him, so I don't think it hurt to be a little less subtle about it for the sake of making it look like Tang can get on his nerves occasionally with how she operates as a partner when it comes to cases more closely concerned with him. Overall, the way this game tells his story is similar to the way Dave Chappelle describes how guys tell stories.
It was me and Dog Eyes. We was at Safeway. Then that nigga Dog Eyes said this. Then I punched that nigga and then I broke out. That's the story.
It definitely feels a little rushed and unfinished in places. Regardless, it does have an undeniable charm to it. It's an interesting look at the criminal underbelly of East Asian culture that doesn't really make a definitive argument about what kind of justice is the right kind. We all have our own ideas of how someone should be punished for committing atrocities, both subjectively and objectively, and those ideas often change from case to case. Wei is quick to enact gang justice on Dog Eyes, but it's fine for Pendrew to just get the prison treatment, despite the fact that they were both behind the deaths of known gang members. And Pendrew was taking things just as personally as everyone claims Wei is. Objectively, you could argue that Dog Eyes hurt more people, but he also wasn't the one directly pulling the trigger. Pendrew definitely was, but the context of it being a wedding massacre is obviously more impactful than just an old dude on his deathbed, right? But Uncle Po was definitely behind more deaths than Dog Eyes could ever hope to commit in his lifetime. Oh, but Pendrew will experience gang justice inside. We don't really know that, considering this gang didn't really care who was going around killing who anyway. A good majority of them have got to be 18K as well. They might actually respect Pendrew for offing the old man for all we know. He did give the 18K the green light to clap the Sun On Yee right then and there. And how would smoking Dog Eyes bring back Wei's sister, Winston, or Peggy? What's the value of a life of someone you don't know that well versus someone you do, or someone you think is more dangerous than someone else? There's less criminals on the street, so who cares if some of them died? Exploring this is what I think is Sleeping Dog's biggest strength as a story. Being a Triad member means protecting and rewarding people that you love and punishing those that transgress against you. But the system gets murky the moment people that you want to love start to transgress against you. Wade just plays into all this internal turmoil as best he can, while still attempting to make himself look loyal to the overall Triad, which isn't exactly hard because very few people in that Triad are actually loyal to each other. So while this does make it seem like Wade is working ass backwards here, it still makes for some interesting and fun moments as he attempts to navigate it all. It makes me wonder how the upcoming movie is going to adapt some of these concepts. We're in an age where it's becoming cool for other types of media to adapt video games instead of it being the other way around. And so far, it hasn't seemed like these other mediums care too much about being very faithful to the source material usually. Now, to play devil's advocate, it's not like video games have a great history of doing justice to the material it's adapting either when it comes to licensing. So in that regard, I guess we're kind of getting what we gave. I would still probably prefer a sequel to this game over a movie, but I guess all fans can do is cross their fingers and hope it's good, which is more than fans of most old IPs can do. Something to be thankful for as you enjoy this holiday season, I guess. This game does its best to emulate the bustling streets of Hong Kong. At times, there can be enough people in certain locations to make it feel sufficiently suffocating, as well as certain spots on the map where traffic gets really irritating, but it's obviously not quite near the levels it can get in actuality. Still, it does get the visuals and vibes down pretty well. United Front reportedly took over 20,000 photos of Hong Kong at the time, and I believe it. Details like just seeing the fog dance around you at night as you drive through it is some atmospheric shit. And then couple that with the ads on the radio where I sometimes can't even tell whether or not they're being serious.
辛苦咗成日，你需要放鬆一下，不如嚟 One-Eyed Monkey 享受舒適柔和嘅按摩。無論係泰式草藥，定係腳底按摩或者頭部按摩 ，One-Eyed Monkey 都係結束一日嘅最佳地方。
You can really feel the culture. If anyone in the comments happens to also speak Cantonese, please tell me what she's saying. I can assume it's about the sauna place that goes by the same name in the game, but I can only imagine what an ad has to say about it. Now, as a dude from America, the first thing you always need to get past in Hong Kong is how everyone drives on the opposite side of the road around here. Seriously, this is the one adjustment I'm always annoyed at making when playing this game because of how much it ends up screwing me over when playing any other city-based open world game that takes place in America. I can't even imagine how awkward it'd be to have to make this adjustment in real life. The next thing you have to get used to as an American is that there's no gun stores. There's not even an underground black market shop or anything. Obviously, gun control is a lot stricter in Hong Kong, but it's even stricter in this game because even if you manage to get your hands on a gun in the open world, there's a good chance the game will just despawn it from Wade's inventory after an unspecified amount of time, and it's not like you have many ways to restock your ammo either. So it's much more likely you'll be settling any confrontation with any gangbanger you see around the city with your fists. Luckily, Hong Kong isn't just filled with gangbangers. When you aren't doing business with the Sun On Yee, you can find people asking for favors around the town that might feature gangbangers. But more often than not, it's just some thief looking for a quick buck. These events ain't exactly the most involved activities you can come across. It's usually just someone asking you to do some goofy shit, run some kind of errand, or more dynamically, apprehend a purse snatcher. But one of the more interesting ones is probably when Wade catches Tiffany hanging out with some other guy. There's a level of insecurity here that may explain why Wade can't keep a girlfriend at this juncture in his life.
Huh. Some excuse. So you're gonna dump her now? Stay loyal to me? Or do I have to go find another man to keep you warm?
Let me see what I can do.
You know, I thought you were different. I guess not. Goodbye.
Tiffany brings up Not Ping, which is another girl Wade meets, but he also could have been dating Amanda at this time too. Now, while Wei isn't able to keep his relationship straight, the reason a player would want to date all of these women is for the rewards they give, revealing collectibles on the map, which range from health shrines that give you a bonus to your overall HP with every 10 prayed at, to lockboxes that give you cash and a goodie or two oftentimes. The Jade statues in particular is a collectible you don't really have to go out of your way to find. Most if not all of them are just placed in locations that the story missions take you to. You could argue they're the most important collectible though, as they're what's used to purchase melee move upgrades. Every time Wei brings a statue back to his Sifu, they have a little exchange. The most interesting one being when he expresses suspicions about Wei being a Triad member. He says that he swore off teaching Triad members ever again, but also that his students don't actually need to definitively reveal that they are one. As hypocritical as this conviction may seem, it's probably the best way he can still run his martial arts school while sticking to it. Sometimes it's better just not knowing, but still expressing how detrimental it can be in the hopes that anyone who actually is a Triad member takes his word to heart. While it's understandable that Wei would be reluctant to tell his Sifu that he's a Triad because he's currently doing police work, he can also participate in police excursions, which is a little weirder. It's already bad enough that he's helping Tang, but at least he can still attempt to maintain his cover while doing it. Here, he's just in full police get-ups assisting law enforcement where anyone can see him. Are the cops really that bad in this town that Wei has to literally do everything? Plus, since the majority of the force doesn't actually know Wei is undercover, imagine one of them recognizing Wei as the guy that killed or injured his partner in a car chase last week or some shit. How awkward would that be? The drug busts make a little more sense. All Wei has to do is beat up the thugs, which can still be acknowledged as regular gang violence, and then hack a security camera that allows him to observe CCTV footage from the safety of his apartment. It's usually not very hard to identify the drug dealer, but I love how when you do, everyone starts making a break for it while the guy about to be arrested just stands around confused. I also find it amusing that you have to fight the thugs before you can complete the bust. Like, you can't just hack the camera when no thugs are around, or else the area will be permanently void of activity. You have to scare them off first before they randomly decide to come back, I guess. It makes these knuckleheads look like they're unaware that a security camera is in the area. And isn't Hong Kong one of those cities in East Asia that basically has a security camera around every block? Old Salty even complains about this during the mission at Tu Chen's house. So these drug dealers must have either made some type of deal with the people that own these cameras, which is why Wei has to hack them, or they're just as dumb as they look when they get arrested because of them. Now, it wouldn't exactly be an open world game based on modern society if it didn't have an economy. I adore the fact that a lot of the clothes you get in the night market are heavily implied to be fake, despite how the vendors scream to you that none of their inventory is. Much like the fake watches Wei and Jackie stole, a lot of their inventory probably comes from foreign importing that claims all of it is real, but since this country doesn't care as much about that stuff, they just take it either way. Which is what makes it even more obnoxious that vendors also have the nerve to insult you for not buying anything.
I love all my customers. I never give them names like Cheapskate Shen. Never.
The street shopping experience just wouldn't be complete without a little unpleasantness. Some of the side ventures I just mentioned do pay out a decent chunk of change, but if you want to get your hands on the more expensive items that probably aren't fake, you either gotta be a really good gambler or get ready for some grinding. I'm not a huge gambler myself, so I can't really tell you how fair the cockfighting or poker minigames are. The spectacle of the cockfighting is sufficiently goofy though.
No, that's a lot of damage!
If you're like me, you'll probably be more interested in things like the street races and fight clubs. We'll talk about the driving a bit later, but the competition you're meant to race against started out a little challenging, but then as I unlocked the higher race classes, began to get a little easier. The rubber banding seems to be at its most effective in the B-class races. It was a little harder to get ahead of the pack and stay there in some of the races without the AI making some kind of idiotic mistake, and you might as well just restart the race if that mistake also involves you. It got noticeably easier once the cars got faster, and all of the courses make pretty good use of the map's layout. There's even some races that end where another race starts, which kind of makes it feel like a multi-leg competition. Going really fast through the streets is usually the biggest reason why games like this feature light traffic. There might be some congestion at scripted spots on the map, but for the most part you can still weave through it relatively easily. I often see this as a complaint when people bring up realism in video games, but if you want to constantly navigate tightly packed streets, go play Traffic Simulator or something, because that's obviously what these games were never about. The fight clubs have got to be my favorite activity, if only because this combat is pretty fun to mess around with. Just a handful of rounds where it's you against them. It's a pretty good way to practice without having to replay any particular mission, which is something I appreciate. Most of the other side content is just busy work. Steal and deliver cars for sale on the black market, steal and deliver trucks to get back at another gang, find a wife stuffed into a trunk playing a very kinky game with her husband, all that good shit. But there is one piece of side content that's of note, the Roland jobs, or more accurately how their chain ends. Roland is an extremely aggressive loan shark that doesn't really care how you pay him back, just as long as you do it in a punctual fashion. I don't think it'd be hyperbole to say that Wei might actually like being Roland's little helper. This guy literally kidnaps a dude's wife in broad daylight just so he could stage her murder with a guy that doesn't even know what the hell is happening. This is how creative he's choosing to get with these stubborn clients. It isn't until one of them feels like they have no other option left that Wei finally says enough. As if traumatizing a guy's wife wasn't already extremely questionable. What was he expecting when a chick nearly made both of them roadkill by jumping out of a car at high speed? Loan sharking is a pretty messy business that I think Wei got a little too excited about involving himself in. It was going to turn into a shit show at some point because you're always going to be dealing with people that may not actually have the money and aren't just being stubborn dickheads. For Christ's sake, just about every person in America is in debt in some way, and that's not necessarily because they're stupid. So not a lot of this side content is especially layered in its implementation, but it does make for relatively quick distractions that don't ask for too much of your time and can occasionally be a little humorous or pay out decently. Pretty much the essential minimum for side content in an open world game, so I can understand why some people may find it to be underwhelming. Hell, as someone who still completes side content even when a lot of it can get pretty exhausting with how superfluous it tends to be these days, even I'll admit that a lot of this stuff isn't really worth doing if you have no intentions of buying everything. Unfortunately, I'm still battling with my OCD, and if you are too, it not being worth it doesn't really mean much to you anyway. All that matters is that sweet, sweet completion percentage. Like most open world games, this one is a mix of several gameplay elements, mostly driving and combat, but also does a little bit of parkour as well. The locomotion in this game isn't as sluggish as say GTA 5's, but it's also not extra snappy either. What's obnoxiously realistic about it here is the animations that play when navigating a crowd of people, both for and against the player. When just walking or jogging, Wei will rudely shove people out of the way, but when sprinting, he'll start ducking and dodging around people instead. This obviously still slows you down a bit, so you usually want to avoid as much NPC contact as possible when sprinting. Much like Enslaved, all of the platforming is contextual, but unlike Enslaved, the timing of your button presses is a bit more important, at least when Wei is sprinting, which requires you to hold a button down, but in order to traverse objects and obstacles efficiently, you need to release the sprint button and then press it again just before Wei reaches that obstacle, or else he'll get over it much slower. This is basically the long and the short of the movement mechanics, and they only really come into play when you're required to chase down a target or escape a chase yourself. It's once we jump into an automobile these things start to get a little more involved. Now, right off the bat, these vehicles feel great to drive. The braking is a little weak, and the camera can feel too restrictive at speeds, as well as attempt to make overcorrections when moving it before you get the vehicle going, which is similar to the way it behaves on foot and can be just as annoying. But the way these things sway and throw their weight around with how sensitive the suspension looks all the time just pleases me visually, even for cars where a bouncy suspension doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They all still handle decently despite this because it's still an arcade style system where every vehicle is super grippy. The biggest difference between all of them is how they drift. Since every machine grips the pavement harder than a rapper grips his nuts in an old school music video, the only way you can really enter a drift is with the handbrake, but not every vehicle drifts equally. Bikes don't really have one, at least not one that's in any way reliable at speeds, but you can do extremely quick 180s with them, which is great for turning around without having to back up first. A lot of cars can do this too, and most can drift with pretty deep angles, but larger vehicles also don't really have much of one at all, and some vehicles require more oversteer than others in order for the drift to straighten out properly. It's a pretty simple, but still enjoyably and somewhat silly system that's just about as fun to mess around with as the combat. Now, while the game does have some gunplay, overall the combat is mostly geared toward hand-to-hand. Wei has a basic 5-strike light combo that can be modified at any point with a heavy ender, a counter, and a grapple move that can be used to either get more focused damage on a target or throw them into the environment. You can also get more actions from combat upgrades that allow you to mix things up a bit more. Honestly, the comparisons to Batman's combat this game got I think were a little exaggerated. Just about every game that had a counter button back then was accused of being an Arkham ripoff, but that's really where the similarities start and end. Batman's combat is about weaving actions between multiple enemies at one time. Your focus on any particular enemy is constantly changing in those games, which is why Batman needs to fly around the battlefield in them. This game's combat is about executing actions on a focused target while occasionally dealing with a flanker, either with the counter button or a directional strike, and also the environmentals, which the Arkham games didn't even get until Arkham Knight. What's actually a bit of a letdown about this game's combat is the enemy variety. There's your standard grunts that are easy enough to deal with, but they sometimes may be holding a weapon. When this happens, you're unable to grapple them and they're more effective at blocking your strikes, so you have to wait for a counter in order to more reliably damage them. There's also the bruisers that require grabs to get through their defense, and the big boy grapplers that often make you play Simon Says to deal with them. Outside of that, there's not much else to the enemies. Even the more specific named ops you face just operate like one of these enemy types, just buffed up a bit. The only strategy you really need here is just mash the strike button while doing a heavy ender every so often, grab the enemies that need to be grabbed, avoid grabbing the ones that can't be grabbed, and use your counters when appropriate. Even while in the middle of a combo, Wei can still recover from a move fast enough to counter most incoming attacks, and a lot of his heavy strikes have armor as well. Not to mention you can get buffs like passive healing and a damage increase by just eating street meat. The face meter that you can build during a fight also comes with its own advantages as well when active. So while I would still say this combat is pretty badass, it doesn't really get much deeper or more difficult than that for the whole game. So about that gunplay. Well, upon first inspection, you could claim that the guns suck. They are extremely inaccurate and often don't have the largest ammo pools. I mean, look at the shotgun spread. Dude is basically taking shrapnel to his dick from just a few meters away and he's still standing. There's only maybe like a handful of guns in the game that have decent accuracy, but the reason why they're so inaccurate and ammo hungry is because I don't think you're supposed to be playing like it's a static shooter. Enemies have pain states when you hit them, meaning there's already less of a reason to mag dump them and instead use controlled fire. But Wei also has a number of tools to give him an edge in a gunfight, namely the slow-mo effect you get when vaulting over objects. Dropping enemies during this effect extends its duration, so you can chain multiple in one use. He can also disarm enemies behind vaultable objects as well, which also gives him a slow-mo follow-up. These actions often allow you to close the distance on enemies so that gun accuracy isn't as much of an issue. While the whack-a-mole style of gunplay that's basically been hardwired into our brains to default to can still get the job done here, I believe this is closer to a Vanquish or Watch Dogs situation, where you're meant to abuse the mechanics the game gives you in order to turn it into a more John Wick-like experience. Something that one of the game's designers touch upon, but may not have been able to translate super clearly to the player in actual gameplay at times. On the real, your biggest enemies when attempting to engage with these mechanics is the locomotion, the restrictive camera, the occasional animation freakout, and the soft locking, which can feel a little too strong sometimes. Wei can also do some other movie-like action stunts, such as shoot from a vehicle, which gives you slow down when tracking a target, power ram other vehicles, and perform leaping hijacks. And a lot of the actions I just mentioned also affect the game's scoring system. Whenever on a primary mission, you have two conditionals to be aware of. Your your cop score and your triad score. Your cop score always starts out perfect, but any mistakes you make, such as harming an innocent person, causing property damage, or performing a sloppy free run action will subtract from that score. On the flip side, your triad score always starts at 0, and doing anything that causes your ops to have a bad time adds to this score. This is a pretty decent scoring system that affects how fast you level up your cop and triad upgrade trees respectively, but there are some issues with its distribution. There are so many more sources in the game that exclusively give you cop experience that the triad upgrade path just doesn't get. The only opportunities to earn triad experience in the base game is just through the primary missions. Any side activities that aren't police related just reward you with face experience, which is a linear perk path that also isn't very difficult to level up as a result, and it's usually harder to max out your triad score during any particular mission than it is to keep a perfect cop score. Like seriously, you could conduct open cheek surgery on every enemy during the mission, but since you didn't have the opportunity to do more superfluous actions, you'll be lucky to get even 2 full triangles. Some of these missions just feel like they were tuned for some kind of hard mode that doesn't exist in terms of even having a chance to get max triad score, yet these opportunities show up the least frequently throughout the entire game by comparison. So I wouldn't say the triad point system is one that invites the player to get more creative, or even encourages them to find the most efficient ways to defeat enemies, which is what I think is the antithesis of what a scoring system should do. There's also several mini-games you may need to play during certain missions. Lockpicking, bug planting, safe cracking, they all just involve twirling or holding the analog sticks in the right directions in sequence, besides the code cracking and call tracking ones, and are pretty inoffensive. The minigame that I think is actually a little disappointing is the fast talking one. It's not even really a minigame, it's just a QTE where you press the same button every time. There are a few that have alternatives, some more goofy than others.
This food! Please tell me it's fucking steamed dumplings.
But most of them just result in a mission reset if you fail them. You'd have to be someone that just wants to give an example of failing these to fail them though. It literally is just the same button every time that gives you a century and a half to press it. There is no quick thinking required here, which you would think is what fast talking asks you to do, but then there aren't even that many alternative options. Like, I don't see why you can't just fight the guys you failed to fast talk for some extra triad points, or if the guys you're talking with aren't gang affiliated, lose cop points at the very least. This just seems like such a half-baked feature. Despite some of these shortcomings though, you can tell that the designers really wanted to give you that feeling of being in a kung fu action movie with the overall gameplay package here, and I'd say they did a pretty good job achieving that. While the enemy variety is a little light, just going to town on them is pretty satisfying because of how well done the animations are, and the constant cries that they make when giving them the business. The infinitely respawning enemies during vehicle missions that clearly only exist to get their tires blown out and explode in the ball of flames in the background is by far one of the most redonkulous ways to design a vehicle combat segment, but it still looks really cool. The fact that you can seamlessly hijack a vehicle at speeds is a mechanic that I don't think we see very much from open world games even today. I can respect the passion put into a lot of this design, even if they maybe didn't have the money, resources, time, or foresight to do everything they wanted to do with it. But that is why we have DLC, which often gives you an idea of what the developers might be capable of with a more focused, smaller slice of the overall game's features. Most of the DLC on offer here isn't that spectacular though. The additional missions don't really add or deviate that much from the core elements the vanilla missions contain. It is kind of cool to do things like be a police officer attempting to gain control of an illegal street race, or participate in a 40-monk battle royale, but these extra missions don't go any deeper than the theming. I'd also recommend not doing Death by 1,000 Cuts early game if you still don't know how to counter correctly, especially with a weapon, which gives way worse defense when holding one as a trade-off for the more effective offense. And just because some of your moves are uninterruptible, it doesn't make them invulnerable. And this entire mission is just about getting stackable DOT procs on the player. In the original version, all of these pre-order missions were apparently repeatable, which allowed you to more conveniently gain experience and possibly helped even out the disparity between the cop and triad grinds. But in the definitive version, you can only play them once. I assume to control the progression more, but that doesn't make it any more balanced. Now, the Zodiac tournament is a bit more significant. This DLC completely focuses on the game's melee combat. Wei is tasked with figuring out what the ruckus is about on this island, and goes deep undercover as a tournament participant. Shenanigans ensue as committed by his opponents, who are all appropriately goofy upon introduction.
Hope you like second prize. Ha 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 ha!
It's eventually revealed that the grand coordinator of this event is just a madman that enjoys watching people suffer and pleasing his investors. He offers Wei a partnership in his business, to which Wei then breaks his neck and turns down. I like this DLC, not just because it's extremely campy, but also because it attempts to make bosses a bit more challenging by giving them more QTEs to deal with. This is really only something that Mr. Tong and the grapplers in the base game had. There's not really much else to this DLC besides that and the Opal statue collectibles, but it's still a fun time. The only other piece of significant DLC is the Wheels of Fury storyline. Dr. Tang, a guy that Wei has helped out in the past, has concocted yet another experiment, the DZS-90, a prototype supercar, but its construction is unfinished. Tang is shipping all of its parts to Hong Kong separately, which wouldn't be a huge problem if every gang in the city didn't catch wind of its arrival. So Tang needs Wei's help to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands while getting to test out all of its gadgets. This obviously turns into a pretty irksome endeavor for Wei, who ends up strong-arming Tang for the car after everything is said and done. Equipped with an EMP and concealable machine guns, this thing basically breaks the game, so I kind of understand why they give it to you so late in the definitive edition. The post-storyline missions that feature it literally just have you mindlessly mowing down cars with the machine guns. It's great for the kind of people that enjoy wanton destruction in their open world games, but endlessly destroying scores of cops and playing like a complete psychopath was never really something I personally found appealing, despite it being one of the major things that offers any sort of dynamic gameplay in these kinds of games. Expansions are usually what I'm more interested in, and luckily this game's got a couple of those as well. Nightmare in North Point is a spooky expansion that plays around with the idea of Wei's enemies coming back to haunt him, and is equally creative as it is intentionally lame. An old Sun On Yee member named Big Scar Wu, I swear there's like 3 guys in this game that all have the name Wu. Also Big Scar? Yeah, because Big Smile Lee's scar made him look like he was smiling. Even the game pokes fun at itself for this.
What kind of name is that? You humans have the most fucked up names.
So of course, this guy goes by Smiley Cat now, because the way the Sun On Yee murdered him involved processing his remains into cat food. So he comes back looking for revenge, stealing Wei's current girlfriend, who we still do not know the real name of, but is apparently the niece of Old Salty now. Smiley Cat threatens to destroy the entire Sun On Yee with his undead army, which honestly doesn't sound too bad. This is obviously a problem the Sun On Yee caused for themselves. Ostensibly, Wei could be pulled out of this operation right now, because this supernatural intervention is the perfect opportunity for the Sun On Yee to destroy itself fighting it. The only reason Wei feels obligated to fix it himself is because 1, Smiley Cat just randomly ran off with not Ping, and 2, he's not just making it a Sun On Yee problem. He basically turned the entire map into a community of glowing-eyed freaks that will randomly start attacking you and other people on the street. Smiley Cat also reveals that he's aware that Wei is a police officer, which is only information that could come back to bite Wei if the Sun On Yee survive this. As one of the few people in the whole freaking gang that's capable of making sure that happens, of course, he saves the day, sending Dog Eyes, Johnny, and Ponytail back to hell before taking care of Smiley Cat. We're then left on a spooky cliffhanger when it's revealed that Not Ping is now possessed. Well, it's a good thing then that she ends up breaking up with Wei.
I will never forgive you. Never. Just don't even try. Just don't even bother. Okay? Okay, call me.
Let her be someone else's problem. Okay, for all the jabs I just took at this expansion, I still like it. While I could deal without cars randomly exploding around you, it's pretty good spooky content that's definitely worth a playthrough during any spooky season. It was also a really dope choice to have Vincent, the random gang member that died during the serial killer case, be Wei's ghost on his shoulder. Although I kind of wish it was Jackie instead. While Pendrew couldn't get much information out of him, he was the one that was always providing answers to Wei's questions, and it'd be nice to just get that closure between them. Now, it doesn't have a lot going for it, About the only new things it introduces is an enemy type that requires you to either be in face mode or use the new weapon against to harm, and the ability to light enemies on fire. As a result, you're really just coming here for the spookiness. But spookiness is maybe one of the few themes we as a society collectively adore for some reason, so I'm not going to complain about it. Year of the Snake is a bit of a different story. Wei is put on beat cop duty for all the foul shit he did during his time in the Triad. Not the most exciting prospect, but things get interesting when a group of cultists decide to put their plan into motion. Believing that the world will end this New Year's, there's no better time to engage in senseless chaos under the cover of joyous festivities. It's a long night as Wei and the rest of law enforcement attempt to regain control of the city while tracking down the mysterious master cult leader. Wei is sort of reduced to just being a cog in the machine here, which on one hand is a nice change of pace, but on the other hand makes the narrative feel a little less engaging, especially with how this game likes to deliver its narratives. The cult doesn't seem to want anything other than to just be a dangerous nuisance, as they predict nothing will matter soon anyway. While I'm not saying a nihilistic cult needs to have an analyzable reason to be nihilistic, I do kind of wish we could see more from characters like Tang attempting to figure out what the cult is all about. I mean, they make a joke of Tang being clueless about it towards the end.
My mother thinks it's aliens. Yes, that kind of alien.
Which is funny, it's just a little sad we didn't get more jokes like it from her. This would have been a good way to put her in the spotlight more, since I think she's one of the more likable characters in this game. Regardless, I do like how this expansion has the context that makes it goofily justifiable to be going around running over people, beating up thugs, and stealing cars even when you're supposed to be law enforcement. This is a time where restraints will only lead to even more people being harmed, so what's a few stolen cars and laid out peds gonna hurt? Other than that, the only significant new things here are the gas grenade launcher and being able to tase dudes, the latter of which is about as ridiculous as you could expect. And it's probably the only reason why you would have ever wanted this expansion back in the day. 10 out of 10 would tase again. Some smaller pieces of content this game ended up getting post-launch was apparently voted on by players, which is kinda cool. A game that attempts to service the player instead of just manipulating them into servicing it is kind of a lost art these days. And while you can argue that this game is a little too easy because of that, there still is something about reveling in the kung fu power fantasy of it all, which is why it's extra sad that United Front still closed down despite all the effort they put into this game. Having been mostly a support studio, this game was the biggest chance they ever had to show what they could do by themselves. For some reason, the industry chose to mostly ignore it. Who knows? Maybe the things that were intended for this game to stand out could be what turned a lot of people off. Perhaps it was the melee combat with its comparisons to the Arkham games, but doesn't really play as fluidly as them, or the inaccuracy of the guns and their lack of access. The fact that this isn't your traditional modern open world game with guns, or maybe because the side activities aren't really as engaging as your average GTA game. All of this brings up the always nagging question of, how much is it worth following the crowd as opposed to doing your own thing? A question that I don't think anyone has a definitive answer to, because I believe we've all been rewarded and punished for following the crowd as well as doing our own thing. Hell, my last video was about a Ninja Theory game, a developer that also makes extremely niche games, and was a support studio at one point, but is still somehow functioning today. Meanwhile, I'd say open world games were a lot more popular even back in 2012, and United Front still had to close its doors eventually, even though this game didn't really do any better or worse than anything Ninja Theory has made as far as I can find. So while few people will ever see this video about a game few people have ever played, at least in comparison to other games, it doesn't make this project any less of a solid effort, even if it is a little rough around the edges. And while my word probably means even less to the people that didn't even bother getting this far, I'd still encourage those people to give it a shot, especially if you're tired of the direction GTA is going in and just want a modern, down-to-earth open world game that actually got some single-player post-launch content, something that I doubt GTA 6 will get either whenever it decides to release, making it even less of a priority for me than it already was being a PC player. I swear, it feels like the only way to not be manipulated by this stuff these days is to just stop caring about it.
People think I'm not gangster. Got to have meat. Makes you strong. Real men. Watch real meat. Hey, no, yo. You want more meat?